I was halfway through grilling burgers on my brand new deck when I saw Patricia Morrison marching across my lawn like she owned the place, her phone already pressed to her ear, and her lips moving fast enough to start a fire. The woman was president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association in Scottsdale, Arizona, and she had made it her personal mission to make my life miserable ever since I moved into this neighborhood 6 months ago. My name is Trevor Jackson, and I had no idea that building a deck would turn into the most satisfying revenge story of my entire life. Patricia was in her mid-50s with that specific haircut that screamed she wanted to speak to the manager of everything. Blonde highlights, always perfectly styled, and she wore athleisure outfits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She stopped at the edge of my new deck, her eyes narrowing as she took in the cedar planks and the careful construction that I had spent the last 3 weeks perfecting. "Trevor," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We need to talk about this monstrosity you have built." I flipped a burger and took my time before responding. "It's a deck, Patricia. And before you ask, yes, I got all the proper permits from the city. Everything is up to code." Her face flushed red, which was never a good sign. "That's not the point. You didn't get approval from the HOA before starting construction. According to our covenant rules, any external modifications require written approval from the Architectural Review Committee." I had read those rules front to back before I even bought the first piece of lumber. Section 12. Subsection 4 states that structural improvements that comply with city building codes and don't exceed 15 feet in height are automatically approved as long as they are reported within 30 days of completion. I submitted my paperwork to the HOA office 2 days ago. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She hated being quoted the rules she supposedly enforced. "We'll see about that," she hissed. "This deck is an eyesore, and I'm going to make sure it comes down." She stormed off, and I went back to my burgers, thinking that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, I got home from my job at the software company downtown to find a white truck parked in my driveway. The words "Scottsdale Building Inspector" were printed on the side in official blue letters. A man in his 40s with a clipboard was walking around my deck, taking measurements and photos. I parked on the street and walked over, my stomach sinking. "Can I help you?" He looked up and smiled apologetically. "Trevor Jackson, I'm Inspector Mike Chen. I received a complaint about unpermitted construction at this address." "I have all my permits," I said immediately, pulling out my phone. "I can show you right now." Inspector Chen nodded. "I figured as much." Someone named Patricia Morrison filed the complaint. She was very insistent that I come out here today. He took the permit number I showed him and checked it against his database. "Yeah, everything looks good here. Your deck is actually built better than code requires. Nice work on those joists." Relief flooded through me. "So we're good. You're perfect," he said, making notes on his clipboard. "Though I do have to tell you, Miss Morrison called my office 4 times yesterday. She seems very determined to find something wrong with your property." I laughed bitterly. "That sounds about right. She's had it out for me since I moved in." Inspector Chen shook his head. "HOA presidents, I've seen this before. They get a little power and suddenly think they run the city too." He paused, looking thoughtful. "You know what's funny, though? She mentioned she's president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. They have that big clubhouse on Oak Ridge Drive, right?" "Yeah, the one they just renovated last year. They raised our dues to pay for it." His expression shifted to something I couldn't quite read. "Renovated, huh? Did they get permits for that?" I had no idea. "Would they need them for a renovation?" "Absolutely, depending on the scope of work, especially if they did any structural changes, electrical or plumbing work." He tapped his pen against his clipboard. You know what? I think I might swing by there after this. If Miss Morrison is so concerned about building codes, I'm sure she made sure her own clubhouse is completely up to code." Something in his tone made me smile. That would only be fair. Inspector Chen grinned back. "I'll send you a copy of your inspection report by email. Everything here is perfect, Mr. Jackson. Have a good day." He drove off, and I went inside feeling lighter than I had in days. Patricia had tried to use the city against me and failed. But I couldn't shake the look on Inspector Chen's face when he mentioned the clubhouse. I decided to do a little digging of my own. That evening, I went onto the Scottsdale City website and searched for building permits associated with the Meadowbrook Heights HOA clubhouse. The address was 4567 Oak Ridge Drive, and it was easy enough to find in their system. What I found made my blood run cold and then boil with anger. The clubhouse had been built in 2001 with proper permits. But the renovation that had been completed just 8 months ago, the one that had cost every homeowner in the neighborhood an extra $300 a month for a full year, there wasn't a single permit on file for it. Not one. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. They had done extensive work. I had seen it myself during the mandatory HOA meeting, where Patricia had proudly shown off the new commercial kitchen, the renovated bathrooms, the expanded meeting room with its knocked-down wall, and the new electrical system that could handle all their fancy equipment. Every single one of those things required permits. Electrical work required a licensed electrician and city inspection. Plumbing work required permits and inspection. Knocking down a wall definitely required permits to ensure it wasn't load-bearing. And a commercial kitchen that required special inspections from both the building department and the health department. I grabbed my phone and called my neighbor, Marcus, who lived 3 houses down. He was a retired contractor and had been one of the few people in the neighborhood who had been friendly to me. "Marcus, it's Trevor. Quick question, were you involved in the clubhouse renovation at all?" "Hell no," Marcus said, his gruff voice crackling over the line. "Patricia didn't want to pay contractor rates. She hired her cousin's company out of Phoenix, some cheap operation." "Why? Did you ever see any inspection notices posted during the construction?" There was a long pause. "Now that you mention it, no, and there should have been." "Trevor, what's going on?" I told him about Patricia calling the building inspector on my deck and what Inspector Chen had said about checking the clubhouse. "I just looked up the permits online, Marcus. There aren't any for the renovation." Marcus whistled low. "Oh, that's bad. That's really bad. The city doesn't mess around with unpermitted work, especially on a commercial structure like the clubhouse. If they did electrical and plumbing without permits, that's serious. What happens if they get caught? Best case scenario, they get slapped with massive fines and have to bring everything up to code retroactively. Worst case, if the work is dangerous or not up to code, they could condemn the building until it's fixed. And depending on how much money was involved, there could be fraud charges if they told the homeowners the dues were going toward permitted work." My hands were shaking. I had paid $3,600 for that renovation, same as every other homeowner in Meadowbrook Heights. There were 97 homes in the neighborhood, which meant the HOA had collected almost $350,000 for the project. "Marcus, what should I do?" "Nothing," he said firmly. "Let the inspector do his job. If Patricia opened this can of worms, let her deal with the consequences. You just sit back and watch." I tried to take his advice, but sleep didn't come easy that night. The next morning, I went to work distracted, checking my email every few minutes for the inspection report Inspector Chen had promised. It arrived just before lunch, and everything was exactly as he had said. My deck passed with flying colors, with a note that the construction quality exceeded minimum code requirements. I forwarded the email to Patricia at the HOA office with a simple message. Inspection complete. Deck approved. Thanks for your concern. Her response came back in less than 5 minutes. This isn't over. The Architectural Review Committee meets next Tuesday and will be discussing your deck's aesthetic compliance with neighborhood standards. I was drafting a response about how she couldn't move goalposts when a second email came through, this one from a different address. It was from Alina Evans, the HOA vice president, and it was sent to the entire neighborhood mailing list. Emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7 p.m. at the Clubhouse. Mandatory attendance, critical issues to discuss. That was unusual. Alina rarely sent neighborhood-wide emails, and Patricia usually handled all communications. I called Marcus again. Did you get Alina's email? Sure did. I'm planning to be there. Something tells me this is going to be interesting. At 6:45 that evening, I walked down to the Clubhouse. The parking lot was already full, and I could see people streaming inside. The building was actually pretty nice from the outside. A southwestern-style structure with stucco walls and a tile roof. The inside had been gutted and renovated with the money they had collected from all of us. I found a seat in the back of the meeting room. The place was packed, which made sense given the mandatory attendance notice. Patricia stood at the front near the podium, her face bright red and her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Alina stood beside her, looking calm but worried. Alina was in her early 40s, with dark hair and a professional manner that made her seem more approachable than Patricia ever had been. At exactly 7, Alina stepped up to the podium. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. I know mandatory meetings are disruptive, but we have a serious situation that needs to be addressed immediately. Patricia tried to interject. Alina, I don't think we need to air this to the entire neighborhood. We absolutely do, Alina said firmly, cutting her off. Every homeowner deserves to know what's happening, especially since it affects all of us financially. A murmur ran through the crowd. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Alina took a deep breath. This afternoon, a Scottsdale building inspector came to examine the clubhouse. He informed me that our renovation, which was completed last year, was done entirely without proper permits. No building permits, no electrical permits, no plumbing permits, and no health department inspection for the commercial kitchen. The murmur turned into shocked exclamations. Someone shouted, "How is that possible?" Alina's expression was grim. I only became aware of this situation today. As vice president, I was not involved in the contractor selection or the permitting process. That was handled entirely by President Morrison. All eyes turned to Patricia, whose face had gone from red to pale. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice shaking. "I hired a licensed contractor. It was his responsibility to get permits. But it was your responsibility as HOA president to ensure that he did," Alina countered. "And to verify that before we paid him. Which brings me to the second issue." She pulled out a folder and opened it. "I spent this afternoon reviewing our financial records. The renovation was budgeted at $349,000 based on the special assessment we collected. But according to the invoices and receipts I found, the contractor was only paid $220,000. The room erupted. People were standing up, shouting questions. I sat frozen in my seat, my mind trying to process what I was hearing. Patricia had not only overseen unpermitted work, but there was also over $100,000 missing. "Where's the rest of the money?" someone demanded. Alina looked directly at Patricia. "That's what I'd like to know." Patricia, as president, you had sole signing authority on the construction account. Can you explain the discrepancy? Patricia's mouth opened and closed. There were other expenses, administrative costs, project management fees. Project management fees. Marcus stood up from the middle of the room, his voice booming. We paid you to manage the project as part of your HOA president duties. You don't get to charge us extra for doing the job you were elected to do. Alina nodded. Mr. Torres is correct. I've consulted with our HOA attorney this afternoon, and there is no provision in our bylaws for the president to collect project management fees. Patricia, I need you to provide a full accounting of every dollar spent from the construction account by end of business tomorrow. You can't make demands of me, Patricia snapped. I'm the president, you work for me. Actually, Alina said calmly, we both work for them. She gestured to the packed room. And as vice president, I'm invoking Section 19 of our bylaws, which allows for the immediate suspension of any board member pending an investigation into financial irregularities or breach of fiduciary duty. You're suspended effective immediately, Patricia. I'll need your keys to the clubhouse and the HOA office. The room fell silent. Patricia's face went through several colors before settling on a furious purple. You can't do this. I can, and I am. The bylaws are clear. You can appeal to the full board, but until this is resolved, you don't have access to any HOA funds or property. Alina held out her hand. Keys, please. For a moment, I thought Patricia might actually hit her. Instead, she yanked a keyring from her purse and threw it on the table. You're making a huge mistake. I'll have my lawyer bury you and this entire neighborhood. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room stayed quiet for a few beats before Alina spoke again. I know this is a lot to process. I'm going to schedule a full board meeting for this Saturday to discuss our next steps. In the meantime, I'll be working with our attorney to understand our legal obligations and options regarding the unpermitted work. The building inspector has given us 30 days to apply for retroactive permits and bring everything up to code, or the clubhouse will be condemned. How much is that going to cost? Someone asked. I don't know yet, Alina admitted, but I promise you complete transparency moving forward. Every expense, every decision will be documented and shared with the entire neighborhood. We'll get through this, but it's going to take all of us working together. The meeting broke up shortly after, with small groups of neighbors clustering together, talking in low, angry voices. I made my way toward Alina, who was gathering papers at the front. She looked exhausted. Alina, I'm Trevor Jackson. I just wanted to say I think you did the right thing. She gave me a tired smile. You're the one with the deck, right? The one Patricia reported, that's me. I'm guessing that's what prompted the inspector to come look at the clubhouse. It was. Inspector Chen told me that he found it suspicious that Patricia was so insistent about inspecting your deck when you clearly had all your permits. He said people who are that aggressive about other people's violations usually have something to hide themselves. She shook her head. I should have been paying closer attention. I trusted Patricia to handle the renovation because she seemed so passionate about it. That was my mistake. You're fixing it now, I said. That takes guts. Marcus came up beside me, extending his hand to Alina. Marcus Torres, retired contractor. If you need someone to look over the work that was done and give you an assessment of what needs to be fixed, I'm happy to volunteer. Alina's expression brightened. That would be incredibly helpful, thank you. Can you come by tomorrow afternoon? Absolutely. Over the next few days, the neighborhood was buzzing with gossip and speculation. Patricia had apparently hired a lawyer who sent a threatening letter to Alina, claiming she was being defamed and would sue for damages. Alina, to her credit, didn't back down. She released a statement to all homeowners explaining that the suspension was procedural and necessary to protect the HOA's interests during the investigation. Meanwhile, Marcus did his inspection of the clubhouse and delivered his report at the emergency board meeting that Saturday. I attended along with about 60 other homeowners who crammed into the folding chairs and lined the walls. Marcus stood at the front, his expression serious. I've done a full walkthrough of the renovation work, and I have to be honest with you all, it's not good. The electrical work is substandard and potentially dangerous. They used the wrong gauge wire for the amperage load in the kitchen, which is a fire hazard. The plumbing has multiple code violations, including improper venting, and the wall they took down to expand the meeting room. It was load-bearing. They put in a beam, but it's not properly sized or supported. This building is unsafe. The room erupted in angry voices. A leaner had to bang a gavel to restore order. Thank you, Marcus. Based on this report and the building inspector's findings, I've consulted with our attorney. We have several options, none of them good. We can hire licensed contractors to redo the work properly, which will cost an estimated $150,000. We can pursue legal action against Patricia and the unlicensed contractor she hired, but that will take years and there's no guarantee we'll recover anything. Or we can try to do both simultaneously. What about the missing money? Someone called out. Can we use that to pay for the fixes? Eliner's expression was grim. That's the other issue. I've now had our accountant do a full audit of the construction account. The missing $129,000 was transferred out in 12 separate transactions over a 6-month period. Each transfer was to an account owned by something called Morrison Property Services. My stomach dropped. Let me guess, I said from the back. Patricia Morrison owns that company. Her husband, Richard Morrison, is listed as the owner. But yes, it's their business. They charged us for project management, administrative oversight, material procurement fees, and inspection coordination. Eliner's voice dripped with sarcasm on the last one. Inspection coordination for inspections that never happened. That's fraud, Marcus said flatly. She embezzled HOA funds. Our attorney agrees, Eliner said. We're filing a police report on Monday. We're also filing a civil suit to recover the funds, and we're placing a lien on Patricia's property within the neighborhood to secure our claim. The board meeting lasted another 2 hours, as we discussed the financial implications and voted on how to proceed. Ultimately, the homeowners voted to pursue both criminal and civil action against Patricia, and to begin the process of getting retroactive permits and fixing the dangerous code violations. I volunteered to serve on a temporary oversight committee to help Eliner manage the process. It felt good to be doing something productive, and honestly, after Patricia had tried to destroy my deck, I had a personal stake in seeing this through. The following Monday, Eliner went to the Scottsdale Police Department and filed a formal complaint for embezzlement and fraud. I went with her for moral support, along with Marcus and 2 other board members. The detective who took the case was a woman named Detective Sarah Ramirez, and she took the matter seriously from the start. HOA fraud is more common than people think, she told us in the interview room. People see all that money flowing through and think they can skim a little off the top without anyone noticing. How much are we talking here? $129,000 in unauthorized payments, Eliner said, sliding over the account statements and invoices. Plus, she oversaw unpermitted construction that's going to cost another $150,000 to fix properly. Detective Ramirez whistled. That's well above the threshold for felony theft. I'll need to get copies of all your financial records. the HOA bylaws showing she didn't have authority to pay herself, and statements from homeowners about the special assessment. "We have all of that prepared," Alina said, handing over a thick folder. "Our attorney helped us organize everything." "Good. That'll speed things up considerably. I'll be in touch." We left the police station feeling like we had taken an important step, but the satisfaction was short-lived. That evening, I got home to find my mailbox had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted "snitch" across it in red letters. I called the police and filed a report, though I had no proof it was Patricia or anyone connected to her. The officer who responded took photos and told me to install a security camera, which I did that weekend. Good thing, too, because 3 days later, the camera caught Patricia herself walking up to my house at 2 in the morning and dumping a bucket of paint thinner on my new deck. The chemicals ate into the wood stain and left ugly marks across the surface. I called Detective Ramirez immediately and sent her the video footage. She came by that afternoon to take a formal statement. "This is vandalism and potentially destruction of property," she said, watching the video on her laptop. "That's clear footage of her face. I'll add it to the charges we're building." "How's the investigation going?" "Well, your former HOA president has been busy. We executed a search warrant on her home office yesterday and found records of similar schemes at 2 other properties she managed. She was running a property management company and doing the same thing to other HOAs, just on a smaller scale. This is going to be a bigger case than we initially thought." My eyes widened. "She did this to other neighborhoods?" "Yep. The fraud unit is bringing in the FBI since it crosses state lines. One of the HOAs she defrauded was in New Mexico. We're talking federal charges now. Over the next few weeks, things escalated quickly. Patricia was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and vandalism. Her bail was set at $50,000, which she posted through a bondsman. But the damage to her reputation was done. Local news picked up the story, and suddenly Meadowbrook Heights was in the spotlight for all the wrong reasons. The neighborhood rallied together in a way I had never seen before. People who had barely spoken to each other were now organizing fundraisers and work parties to help offset the costs of fixing the clubhouse. Marcus organized a team of retired contractors and handymen to do some of the less technical work, saving us money on labor. I threw myself into helping with the repairs. My software job was flexible enough that I could take a few hours in the afternoons to help out. We got the proper permits, and the city inspectors were actually pretty helpful once they understood the situation. Inspector Chen even gave us recommendations for reputable contractors who could handle the electrical and structural work. Alina was working around the clock as acting president, and I found myself spending more time with her as we coordinated volunteers and dealt with contractors. She was smart, organized, and had a dry sense of humor that made even the worst days bearable. One evening in late March, about 6 weeks after the whole mess started, we were sitting on the clubhouse patio reviewing contractor bids. The sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "You know," Alina said, setting down her pen, "when I moved to Meadowbrook Heights 5 years ago, I never imagined I'd end up here. Running an HOA in crisis," she laughed. "Exactly. I was happy being vice president and letting Patricia handle everything. I should have been more involved. You didn't know she was corrupt. That's not on you, maybe, but I still feel responsible." She turned to look at me. "What about you? If you had known what buying that house would lead to, would you still have moved here?" I thought about it. My deck was damaged but repairable. I had been vandalized and harassed, but I had also found a real community here, people who were willing to fight for what was right, and I had helped take down someone who had been stealing from her neighbors for years. Yeah, I said. I think I would. Besides, my deck looks great once I get it restained, Elena smiled. It does. Patricia was wrong about that. Patricia was wrong about a lot of things. The criminal case moved forward through the spring and into early summer. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested. With the FBI involved and evidence of fraud across multiple states, they wanted to make an example of her. The trial was set for August in Maricopa County Superior Court. I was called as a witness, along with Elena, Marcus, and several other homeowners. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Patricia had systematically stolen from the people who had trusted her to manage their community. She had hired an unlicensed contractor to do substandard work without permits, pocketing the difference between what she collected and what she actually spent. And when someone threatened to expose her, she had retaliated with vandalism and intimidation. The defense tried to argue that Patricia had legitimately believed she was entitled to project management fees, and that the unlicensed contractor had deceived her about the permits. But the prosecution had emails showing Patricia explicitly instructing the contractor not to pull permits because it would save time and money. They also had bank records showing she had paid herself for inspection coordination on dates when no inspections had occurred. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Patricia was found guilty on 14 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and vandalism. Sentencing was scheduled for October. In the meantime, the civil case moved forward as well. The HOA's lawsuit against Patricia and her husband sought to recover the stolen funds, plus the cost of fixing the clubhouse and legal fees. Richard Morrison tried to claim he had no knowledge of what his wife was doing, but the prosecution proved he had benefited from the stolen money, including using HOA funds to pay for a luxury vacation to Hawaii. By September, the clubhouse repairs were finally complete. We held a grand reopening celebration, inviting everyone in the neighborhood to tour the properly renovated space. The commercial kitchen gleamed with all new, code-compliant appliances. The meeting room was structurally sound with proper support beams. The electrical and plumbing systems were completely redone by licensed contractors and had passed every inspection with flying colors. Elena stood at the front of the crowded room, looking both relieved and proud. "I know this has been an incredibly difficult year for all of us," she said. "We've dealt with betrayal, financial stress, and a lot of uncertainty. But we've also come together as a community in ways I never expected. This clubhouse isn't just a building anymore. It's a symbol of what we can accomplish when we work together and refuse to accept corruption." The room erupted in applause. I clapped along with everyone else, feeling a genuine sense of accomplishment. We had started with a destroyed clubhouse and a theft that could have bankrupted the HOA. We were ending with a properly built facility and a stronger, more engaged community. After the celebration wound down, I helped Elena clean up. We worked in comfortable silence, stacking chairs and picking up plates. "Trevor," Elena said as we were finishing up, "thank you for everything you've done. I don't think we could have gotten through this without you." "You give me too much credit. You're the one who stood up to Patricia in the first place. But you backed me up when I needed it. A lot of people were scared to go against her. You weren't." I shrugged. "She vandalized my deck. That made it personal." Elena laughed. "Well, I'm glad she did in a weird way. Otherwise, you might not have gotten involved." "Speaking of the deck," I said, "I'm having a barbecue next Saturday to celebrate it being fully repaired. You should come. Bring whoever you want." Her smile widened. "I'd like that. Can I bring potato salad?" "Absolutely." Patricia Morrison's sentencing hearing took place on October 15th. The judge was not sympathetic. She sentenced Patricia to 6 years in federal prison for the fraud charges, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She also ordered Patricia to pay full restitution to the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, which now totaled over $300,000 when legal fees and repair costs were included. Richard Morrison was sentenced to 2 years and ordered to pay half the restitution, since he had benefited from the stolen funds. Their house in Meadowbrook Heights was sold to satisfy part of the judgment, with the proceeds going to the HOA. The civil case wrapped up shortly after, with the judge awarding the HOA everything they had asked for. Between the house sale and wage garnishments that would follow Patricia for decades, we were eventually going to recover most of what had been stolen. By November, life in Meadowbrook Heights had returned to something resembling normal. Eleanor was elected president in a special election, running unopposed. She appointed me to the Architectural Review Committee, which I accepted with the understanding that I would advocate for reasonable rules and common sense. One of my first acts was to propose updating the HOA covenants to require transparency for all construction projects, and to mandate that no single board member could have sole signing authority on accounts over $10,000. The changes passed unanimously. My deck became something of a neighborhood landmark, since it was the catalyst that had brought down Patricia's schemes. People would walk by and point it out to visitors, telling the story of how a simple building permit inspection had unraveled years of fraud. I eventually put a small plaque on the railing that said "Built with proper permits," just for the irony of it. The barbecue I hosted that Saturday in September had turned into a regular thing. Every few weeks, I would fire up the grill and invite neighbors over. Eleanor came to every single one, and by December, we had started dating. It felt natural and right. 2 people who had been through something difficult together and had come out stronger on the other side. On a warm evening in early January, almost exactly a year after I had first moved to Meadowbrook Heights, Eleanor and I sat on my deck watching the sunset. The wood had been fully repaired and restained, looking better than ever. In the distance, we could see the clubhouse, its lights glowing warmly. "You ever think about what would have happened if Patricia had just left you alone?" Eleanor asked. "If she had never reported your deck all the time," I admitted. "She would probably still be president, still stealing from everyone, and nobody would have known. Makes you wonder how many HOAs out there have someone like her in charge. Probably more than we want to know. But at least in Meadowbrook Heights, people are paying attention now. Nobody's going to get away with that kind of thing again." Eleanor leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know what the funny part is? Patricia thought your deck was going to be her big win. She was so sure she'd found a violation and could force you to tear it down. Instead, it ended up being the thing that destroyed her. Karma's poetic that way. It really is." We sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sky turned from orange to purple to deep blue. Stars began to appear overhead, bright and clear in the desert sky. Somewhere in a federal prison, Patricia Morrison was probably reflecting on the choices that had led her there. Somewhere in Meadowbrook Heights, 97 families were living in a community that was stronger and more united than it had ever been. And on my properly permitted, perfectly legal, absolutely beautiful deck, I was sitting with someone special, grateful for every twist and turn that had brought us to this moment. The next few months were peaceful in a way I had never experienced before. The HOA ran smoothly under Eleanor's leadership, with actual transparency and accountability. Financial reports were published monthly. Board meetings were well attended, but drama-free. The Architectural Review Committee approved several new projects, including a pool for the Martinez family and a workshop for old Mr. Henderson, all with proper permits and reasonable timelines. I continued working at the software company, but found myself more invested in the neighborhood than I had ever been anywhere I lived. Marcus and I started a monthly poker game that rotated between houses. I helped organize a neighborhood watch program that actually focused on community building rather than paranoid surveillance. Life was good. In March, Alina and I took a weekend trip to Sedona, driving up through the Red Rocks and staying at a small bed and breakfast. On a hike through Cathedral Rock, with the afternoon sun turning the landscape golden, I asked her to move in with me. She said yes without hesitation. We spent the next few weeks combining households, and Alina put her condo on the market. It sold quickly to a young couple who were thrilled to be joining Meadowbrook Heights. I made sure to give them a full briefing on HOA history, including the Patricia saga, which they found both horrifying and hilarious. By summer, the neighborhood had fully recovered from the financial impact of Patricia's theft. The restitution payments were coming in steadily, and we had even built up a reserve fund that would prevent future boards from having to do special assessments for emergencies. The clubhouse was booked solid with events, everything from kids' birthday parties to book clubs to fitness classes. I was at work one Tuesday afternoon in July when Alina called, her voice tight with excitement. "Trevor, you need to see this. Can you come home early? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Just trust me, come home." I told my boss I had a family emergency and drove back to Meadowbrook Heights, my mind spinning with possibilities. When I pulled up to the house, Alina was standing in the driveway holding a large envelope. "What is that?" I asked, getting out of the car. "Open it." Inside was a check made out to the Meadowbrook Heights HOA for $173,000. I stared at it, not understanding. Where did this come from? The FBI seized some additional assets from Patricia's property management company. Equipment, vehicles, real estate in New Mexico. They auctioned it all off, and this is our share. Trevor, we've now recovered more than we lost. After all expenses, every homeowner in Meadowbrook Heights is getting a rebate of $200 on their next HOA dues. I looked at the check, then at Alina, then started laughing. Patricia tried to rob us blind, and we ended up making money. The universe has a sense of humor. We went inside, and Alina immediately started drafting an email to send to all the homeowners. I poured us each a glass of wine, and we toasted to justice, persistence, and the unexpected ways things work out. That evening, we had another barbecue on the deck. Word had spread about the rebate, and people were in a celebratory mood. Marcus brought his famous ribs. The Martinez family brought their kids and a watermelon. Old Mr. Henderson brought homemade ice cream. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. As the evening wore on and the party showed no signs of stopping, I found myself standing at the railing of my deck, looking out at my neighbors, my friends, my community. Alina came up beside me, sliding her arm around my waist. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking that a year and a half ago, I was just a guy who wanted to build a deck. And Patricia Morrison tried to destroy it, tried to make my life miserable, all because she needed to control everything and everyone. And instead, she lost everything. Yeah. But more than that, her trying to hurt me led to all of this." I gestured to the party, the people, the joy. If she had just left me alone, I would have been a guy with a deck who barely knew his neighbors. Instead, I found a home. A real home. Alina kissed my cheek. We both did. The party went late into the night, with people finally trickling home around 11. Alina and I cleaned up together, then sat on the deck under the stars. exhausted but happy. "I have something to tell you," Alina said, her voice soft. "The board met yesterday and voted to officially name the clubhouse meeting room after you." I turned to look at her. "What? Why?" "Because you stood up when it mattered. Because your deck, your willingness to follow the rules and fight back when Patricia tried to bully you, saved this entire community. They want to call it the Jackson Community Room." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. "That's too much. It's not nearly enough. Trevor, you changed everything here. You deserve to be recognized for that." The dedication ceremony for the Jackson Community Room took place in August, timed to coincide with the 2-year anniversary of my move to Meadowbrook Heights. The room was packed with neighbors, and there was a small bronze plaque mounted beside the door with my name, and a brief explanation of how the room had been properly renovated and permitted. Marcus gave a speech about integrity and standing up for what's right. Alina gave a speech about how one person can make a difference. Then it was my turn to say something, and I found myself getting choked up as I looked out at all the faces. "When I built my deck," I said, "I just wanted a place to grill burgers and enjoy Arizona evenings. I never imagined it would lead to all of this, but I'm grateful it did. What Patricia Morrison tried to do was wrong, and she's paying the price for that. But what you all did, coming together to fix what she broke, standing up for each other, that's what I'll remember. This room isn't really named after me. It's named after all of us, and what we can accomplish when we refuse to accept corruption and hold each other accountable. Thank you for making Meadowbrook Heights a real community." The applause was thunderous, and I stepped down from the podium feeling like I might actually cry. Alina hugged me tight, and Marcus slapped me on the back hard enough to bruise. The rest of the day was a celebration, with food and music and kids running around playing games. As the sun set, someone brought out a projector and we watched a movie on the side of the clubhouse, sitting in lawn chairs and on blankets spread across the grass. I sat with Alina, her hand in mine, and thought about the journey that had brought me here. A vindictive HOA president had tried to abuse her power and had ended up in federal prison. A neighborhood had come together to right a wrong and had emerged stronger. And I had found not just a house, but a home, and not just a girlfriend, but a partner. Life in Meadowbrook Heights continued to improve. Alina and I got engaged on Christmas Eve, standing on my deck under a rare Arizona snowfall that dusted the desert with white. We planned a spring wedding, nothing fancy, just our neighbors and closest friends at the clubhouse. Patricia Morrison served her time quietly, and I heard through the legal grapevine that she was a model prisoner, taking classes and staying out of trouble. I hoped she learned something from the experience, though I doubted our paths would ever cross again. Richard Morrison moved to California after his release, leaving Arizona behind entirely. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA became something of a model for other communities. Alina was invited to speak at a national HOA conference about transparency and preventing fraud. She brought me along, and we made a weekend of it in Denver, hiking in the Rockies and talking about our future. By the time our wedding rolled around in April, 2 years after the whole deck saga began, Meadowbrook Heights felt like the kind of place people wrote about in idealistic suburban magazines. We had our problems, sure, but we faced them together with honesty and mutual respect. The wedding ceremony took place in the Jackson Community Room, which felt appropriate. Marcus was my best man. Alina's sister was her maid of honor. We exchanged vows in front of 97 families, the entire neighborhood showing up to celebrate with us. At the reception, which spilled out onto the clubhouse patio and lawn, I gave a toast. 2 years ago, I moved to Meadowbrook Heights and built a deck. It's still the best decision I ever made because it led me here, to Alina, to all of you, to this community that has become my family. Thank you for standing with me when things were hard. Thank you for making this neighborhood a place worth fighting for. And thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected conflicts. Alina added her own toast. And thank you, Patricia Morrison, wherever you are, for being terrible enough to unite us all against you. We literally couldn't have done this without your corruption and vindictiveness. The room erupted in laughter and applause. We danced under string lights as the sun set over the desert, surrounded by people who had started as strangers and become family. Later that night, after the party had ended and Alina and I were back home on our deck, she leaned against me and sighed contentedly. You know what the best part of all this is? What's that? Patricia wanted to tear down your deck, and instead we built a life on it. I kissed the top of her head. Yeah, we did. The deck that started everything remained my favorite place in the world. We had breakfast there most mornings, coffee and newspapers while the Arizona sun warmed the wood. We had dinner there most evenings, grilling vegetables and watching the sky change colors. We had conversations there that shaped our marriage, our plans, our dreams. Years would pass, and the story of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA scandal would become legend in the neighborhood, told to new residents as both a cautionary tale and a point of pride. The clubhouse would host countless events, all properly permitted and transparently managed. The Jackson Community Room would see weddings, memorials, birthday parties, and town halls, where neighbors continued to hold their leaders accountable. And on a deck in the Arizona desert, properly permitted and built with integrity, a man who just wanted a place to grill burgers found everything he never knew he needed. A home, a community, a wife, a purpose. All because a corrupt HOA president made the mistake of thinking she could bully someone who refused to back down. All because a building inspector decided to check the clubhouse that same day. All because sometimes the universe has a sense of justice that's better than anything we could write ourselves. I never did get around to building the pergola I had originally planned for the deck. Alina and I talked about it sometimes, but we always decided we liked it the way it was. Simple, open to the sky, perfect for watching stars and sunsets. Besides, after everything that happened with the last construction project, I figured we had tempted fate enough. The deck was perfect as it was. A symbol of doing things right, standing up for principle, and the unexpected ways that conflict can forge community. And every time I fired up the grill and invited neighbors over, I was reminded that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something better than what came before and refusing to let corrupt people define your experience. Patricia Morrison tried to tear down my deck. Instead, she tore down her own life and built up an entire community in the process. That was justice far better than anything I could have orchestrated. As for me, I just kept grilling burgers, loving my wife, and living in a neighborhood that proved people could be better when they held each other accountable and worked together toward common goals. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. And it all started with a deck, a permit, and a vindictive HOA president who never saw karma coming.